Hello, everyone. Welcome to this EconTEAch seminar on mentorship, supporting students applying to grad school. I am Ramin Nasei. I'm a lecturer at the Department of Economics at UCL and part of CTAIL. And tonight I have the pleasure of hosting this session. So the speakers today will be Dina, Carl, and Gaia, so I'll ask them to introduce themselves later on. But in the meantime, let's warm up. First of all, if you can open up your camera, we very much appreciate it. The more people you open up the camera, the merrier. So before we start, let me ask the participants to tell a little bit about themselves. So if you could just put in the chat, right? Let's say 2 bullet points that would describe you. This could be your affiliation, your research, something about you as a person with 2 bullet points. Not now. Let's give it 1 minute. So prepare your answer in the chat. And then after 1 minute, I ask you to press enter. So 2 bullet points that would describe you professionally. So in the meantime that you are preparing your answers, let me just go through some housekeeping matters. The session is recorded and live streamed on YouTube. I am going to ask Dina to present first for 10 minutes. Then we'll collect some quick questions for her, and then we go to Carl and Gaia. So can I ask you to enter your answers in the chat now, please? Very tired. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, good. So we're waiting. Yeah. So Dina, would you like to go first, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your project? What is it that you're doing? Why are you doing it? I think you're mute. Hi.
Yeah. All right. So I was saying, hi, I'm Dina Pomerantz. I'm assistant professor of economics at the University of Zurich. And I'm here to talk a little bit about GAIN, a Graduate Applications International Network. This started when I was doing some projects in Kenya, and I had previously done research projects mostly in Chile and Ecuador. And I noticed a stark difference between how the research assistants sort of were organized and conceived of themselves, where in Chile and Ecuador, there was this whole pipeline of students who wanted to do a PhD in economics and therefore were looking to work as a research assistant with the idea of learning something and then being, applying and becoming a professor themselves, coming back to do research projects. And in Kenya, it was more like people worked as an RA, and then they worked as an RA, and then they worked as an RA, and maybe one day they become a research manager, but there wasn't this pipeline between the professors working with the RAs and the RAs being the future professors. And I talked a lot with my RAs from Kenya about how we can build this pipeline of African students also to, if those who want, going into the PhD programs. And I'm a development economist, and when you go to development economics conference, it's really striking how few Africans there are. And it's very embarrassing, I think, for our profession that we study a lot of times things in the African continent. And then, I mean, for Latin America and Asia, it's actually not universally better. There are some countries that for which it's great, like, Chile, Brazil, Colombia, India. Then some other countries, there are also very few.
So it would be good if, Claudia, would you be able to put, I think your project is called GAIN, correct?
Yes.
It would be great if you could put the link to it. And in the meantime, so just correct me, so the project is focused on Kenya and the mentorship with students.
So we decided then to focus on the African continent. even though there are other low-income countries outside the continent that are also underrepresented. We could imagine going to other underrepresented countries in the future, but right now we are focusing on the African continent. And essentially we were thinking, what are the things missing that are there in a country like Chile? And one is information. How does it work? Who can even do it? The fact that it's actually available, like you can become the next Michael Kramer. There is a pathway, and then how do you do it? Who is actually qualified for this thing? And then also the costs, right? So then you have to apply. The GRE is part of the cost, but actually what people talk about less is the application fees of the universities.
So Adina, would you like to present, or do you have, yes? Sorry?
No? Can you not hear me well?
Yeah, that's right. Would you like to share your slides and present?
I don't have slides.
Oh, okay, great. The misunderstanding. So let me then go to Carl and Gaia. So
sorry, I thought I was supposed to talk for 10 minutes.
So I'll be collect now. I'll then, so misunderstanding. I thought you were, you were presenting. So let's go around and.
I thought I was presenting. I'm not presenting now.
No, nobody's presenting. I'm just. It's a very relaxed econ.
Okay. I was going to talk for 10 minutes. I took some notes, so I thought I should talk about how this started and what we're doing.
That's
so what am I supposed to do?
No, I'll just ask some questions, and then it's a roundtable discussion. Yeah. Okay,
no presentation.
No presentation, no, very relaxed conversation. Yeah.
So I'm not going to tell you what GAIN does. Okay.
No, I mean, I'll come back about GAIN. I'll return to you about the GAIN, but let me first go to Carl. And Carl, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the project that you're doing, why you're doing it?
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for having Gaia and me. I'm Carl. I'm a PhD student at UCL in economics. I work predominantly in labor economics, and my research focuses on inequality and social mobility. So I have a research interest in this broad topic as well. But I'm one of the UCL coordinators of the applicant mentoring program, which we started at UCL last year, but it was actually started at LSE, is where it had its inception. So I'll pass to Gaia to maybe say a bit more about that. Thank you.
Hi, hello everyone, and thank you so much for having us on the panel. My name is Gaia, and I'm a third-year PhD student in economics at the LSE. Similar to Carl, I'm also a labor economist. I'm very interested in issues of discrimination, inequality, and occupational choice more in general. I'm also not among the founders of the AMP, the Applicant Mentoring Program, but I joined a few months after the program was started by two PhD students at LSE who started thinking about the program after what happened with George Floyd. George Floyd triggered a lot of talks kind of throughout society, but also in economics about what we can do to increase the representation of minorities, not only Blacks, but what can be done on this margin. And kind of, they had a lot of brainstorming sessions, and one idea that came up was that of setting up a mentoring program. And so here we are 3 years afterwards. After the first wave of the program, other universities got involved, and now we are kind of like a consortium of 5 universities in the UK. Even though similar programs, of course, exist elsewhere, there's a program in the US. The target of the program is not only UK universities, so applicants to UK universities, but it's kind of like a way to homogenize and recruit mentors across a broader pool of universities who jointly mentor the applicants to the program.
Very good. So let me go back to Dina. So let's start with the bigger, problem. Why do we need these mentorship programs? What's the problem?
So that's what I think I just talked about. So I guess I could that there isn't a pipeline, that there's a huge underrepresentation, that there's information missing and funding. That was my introduction before. So maybe you want to go to the next person, or you want me to tell you what
Yeah, more about the information. Could you elaborate more on the information barrier, please?
Yeah, as I said, so people don't know that if you're an RA in some countries where there isn't a pipeline, there isn't this knowledge that you could actually become the professor. There isn't the knowledge about how to apply for this, who is actually qualified, and what you need to apply for the program. Also how to study for the GRE and things like that. So I think those are the points that I have mentioned. Yes, thanks.
Carl, Gaia, can you add any other barriers, information barriers that exist out there?
Gaia, do you want to? I think the information barriers, obviously, as Dina has outlined, quite a big one. But what we often find as well is that people are sort of like lacking in motivation and the belief that they can do it. So even when they've got quite a good grasp of what the structure of the applications are and what it takes, I guess, in terms of what you need to submit and the credentials you need to have, I think often they don't trust themselves. And I think that's something that we've seen in our mentoring that plays quite a big role, that our mentors spend quite a large time speaking about their own experience and sort of like sharing that and encouraging people to apply and building up their confidence. And I think that's quite an important channel there as well, rather than just the information. Gaia, what do you think? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And another margin that's a little bit perhaps more unexpected that we found that really speaks to a lack of information is that a lot of times the mentees of our program aren't really aware of either what really the requirements for a competitive application are. And so a little bit of mentoring can help with that. And also kind of really at the point of the application, some of them have mixed information on how good the GRE score should be, what really kind of like the more practical things to get the application through are. And in this case, really, again, it's really kind of like lack of information and a small intervention, like talking to someone or being mentored. We've seen that it can really, really help with this.
So information barriers, what about skill barriers? Dina, do you have any thoughts on that?
So we are working with students who are highly qualified and who may not know, as Carl pointed out, that they actually qualify. We can obviously not provide a whole master's in economics online. So we're looking for the many brilliant Africans that are out there and who may not know that this could be a path for them, or if so, how to do it, and also then providing the funding and stuff like that. I think it's more about detecting talent, and actually there's more and more really good economics programs on the continent, and yeah.
So you're not providing any extra skills, it's just spotting the talent, correct?
If you'd like, I can tell a little bit about our program though. So we have a 3-part program.
Yeah.
It starts with a webinar series. So you have to apply. It's open to all students from Africa. They can have already a degree from outside of the continent, or they can have all their education on the continent. Then they can apply to the webinar series. And so we take students who have graduated in at least undergraduate in economics or related fields, and who graduated with good grades, and who are motivated and interested in potentially pursuing graduate school. So then there's about 3 months of webinars where students learn what is involved, how much work is the application process, would they actually qualify, what do the graduate degrees look like, and then see if they're still really interested in doing this. And during this phase, we have homework assignments where students can already do a GRE preparation test to see where they rank a little bit, how much there's left to do, think about which schools they would choose, think about who would like their letters of recommendation, and kind of do little preparation steps in terms of their application process. And then among those who are still actually interested after learning all that is involved, we then select the most qualified ones to go to the second stage, which is the mentoring phase. In the mentoring phase, students get paired. So then the webinars start around March, and the mentoring starts around July. And it's really great because thanks to Zoom, right, we can do all of this online. And so then based on the homework that people did and the other qualifications, we select people, we match them to a mentor that has about once a week a call, and where they together prepare the application materials. In addition, we have funding from the Swiss government and the Hewlett Foundation that we can support the application fees that students pay and the test fees, which is another big barrier. And so the second phase is this one-on-one mentoring and application financial support. And then among those who get into the graduate school and can start, and the funding, getting funding is another big thing, challenge we can maybe talk about. Then you have a part 3 newly, where it's a peer-to-peer support of African graduate students when they're in graduate school to support each other, because the research has also shown that getting in is one thing, but if you're in a strongly underrepresented group, it can feel very isolating. And so through Zooms, we can create these sort of peer-to-peer mentoring and community, even if you happen to be the only one in your class, but then you have sort of your gain class classmates that will support you. So those are the 3 stages that we have. And so it has all information, mentoring, role models, funding, and support during grad school is the new part that we just.
So very good. I mean, if I want to, summarize, correct me if I'm wrong. So your focus is on African continent, PhD level, and you start with webinar series, then the homework assignment, then after that is the mentoring phase, and finally peer-to-peer support. Is that a fair summary of your program? Gain?
It's both for masters and PhD. So we support both students the goal would be, our mission in a way is to have Africans more represented in the economics profession. And so eventually that for us means that, people become researchers and professors. But along the way to there, sometimes the first step is to do a master's. Sometimes people are already ready for a PhD, and some people choose along the way, obviously, not to become a professor, which is also fine.
And what's the size of your program? This is a question coming from Parama.
I'm trying to, I think this year we had about 400 people starting the webinars. But then obviously a lot of people realize once they go, oh, this is not for me. And I think we had, I want to say 60 people in the mentoring phase this fall. We've been growing a lot. This is our 3rd year. It's been growing a lot.
So the initial stage is 400, but
this is we're trying to on the top of my head, yeah.
With the peer-to-peer support, you got around 60 students at the end of the pipeline.
No, the peer-to-peer, sorry, the mentoring is phase 2, right? So where you get a mentor, that's around 60.
Around 60, very good.
It's not peer-to-peer, right? That's like you mentoring, for example, as a professor, somebody who's applying to graduate school.
Yeah. So you start with 400, but in the second phase, you got 60. Very good. Thank you. So let's go to Gaia. Would you like to tell us a little bit? I think you already mentioned why you're doing it and the target of your program and your project. Would you like to tell us about the things you're doing to help?
Of course. So our program is kind of much smaller, both in scale and in length. And really, what we provide is a 1-hour face-to-face mentoring that usually happens over Zoom, where volunteer mentors who are current PhD students help mentees who sign up to our program with either really the application phase, so the application to PhDs, or planning what to do to eventually apply to a PhD in, say, 1 or 2 years. And in that, the program kind of ended up being structured in almost 2 tiers. So there's the applicants who really want to apply to PhDs right away, and there's the ones instead who are building up kind of the way to apply. And the size of the program is smaller. Last year we had around 70 mentors who on average mentor 2 students. so about 150 mentees.
So 70 students, more is a mentorship, one-to-one mentorship, and the mentorship is done by the current PhD students.
Exactly.
Yeah, and could you, let me go to Carl. Carl, would you just go into a little bit of detail? What happens into that, one-to-one mentoring sessions?
So in these one-to-one mentoring sessions, what we ask all the mentors to do is to at least review the application material that is sent by the applicant. Of course, if that applicant has all the materials already or is putting in an application in that cycle, so we have a split of so last year was about 2/3 of our mentees applied within that same cycle. So they would start in the fall with the mentorship and would submit applications over Christmas and the new year. And 1/3 is people who, as Gaia pointed out, who are thinking about applying to PhDs and sort of have a bit more of a longer timeline. And so depending on where the mentee is, that's how the mentorship then is kind of tailored. And we really have a big focus on it being about what the individual needs. So it's not very regimented in that sense. So we only require the mentors to review the application material and to have at least one call. So mentors may choose to have more than one call if that is necessary and if it's helpful. But that is what we require them to do. And we also provide our mentors with some training so that we can ensure sort of like a general standard of understanding of the application process. Yeah. And for example, so we had what was super helpful, we had a meeting at UCL with the admissions team to understand kind of the process and what applicants might find more or less helpful in terms of aiding them in the process.
Provides the training for the mentors.
We do. So, and it's the very specific thing I think is that what we always try and make sure is that people don't just force their own experience as kind of a blueprint onto the mentee. So it's not just what I did is the best way, but that these are all of the, so what we provide in the training is more so that people understand these are the deadlines, these are the requirements. So all of the hard facts, right? Because there isn't just one single approach that's the right approach to applying. There's an array of approaches. And I think there's sometimes a danger with mentorship of making it all about your experience. And while that can be very helpful, you should never say this is kind of the blueprint to success.
Following on that, so you said 1/3 of the applicants are thinking about applying. So and many of you said, yeah, there's always this confidence deficit. So for that 1/3, what's your main encouragement strategy to encourage them to push them to apply?
Again, I think that depends like quite heavily on the individual circumstance and on the mentor. I think it's very hard to give a blanket answer, but I think in general it's coming back to what Dina already pointed out. So it's a measure of like providing information and also saying, oh look, you already have some of these credentials, so and these are your possible options. But I think what and Gaia, sorry, please come in if you have any other points. But so the one thing that I find quite important is that when we have a longer time frame in terms of the amount of time that people have to the deadlines, they also have more possibilities to explore other things, to, for example, do another RA, to think, to consider these things a bit more. And maybe they have a bit more of time to enhance their application, so to speak, and also to gain that experience. And our Gaia is a big believer in RAs and thinks that they're very valuable. So Gaia, do you want to add anything? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you covered everything perfect, but something I wanted to add, because I find it super interesting and super fascinating, is that we talked a lot about information. But in fact, when we asked both mentors and mentees in separate follow-up surveys, just for us to know what was going on in these meetings, what was being discussed, we learned from the mentees that it's super important what they learn about the process, and they learn about GRE thresholds. But most of them really report that what mattered the most was, sitting down with someone, and these had a huge kind of positive impact really on kind of the realization that they can actually go ahead and apply. So kind of like a confidence boost, a motivation channel. And I think these gave us a lot of kind of reassuring. It was really reassuring that the program matters. It's not only about information, so it's not like we can bring in a pamphlet with saying this is the GRE score that you need. We can go home and we don't need our PhD mentors anymore.
Before I go to Dina, just a related question. Parama says, what kind of geographic spread of your participants do you have? And in terms of matching, do you try to match, let's say, an Italian applicant with an Italian student who's already there, in terms of, sharing the same background? Do you do that?
Yeah, great questions. We think about those all the time when we discuss about this. So the geographic split has been pretty, I would say, pretty heterogeneous. We've had many students from Asia, but from a lot of different countries. In Asia, a few from Africa. We've noticed that a lot of, kind of our pool is really kind of also representative of the channels that we're able to get the program kind of spread the information through. So that's kind of like something that we're also working on at the moment, trying to find as many channels as possible to convey the existence of the program. And about the matching of mentors, this is a really tough problem because diversity and similarity are not binary characteristics. And so people have a lot of different characteristics and it's hard to match just on one. What we've been trying to do, and we've had kind of very good feedback on this as well from the mentees, is to match on a kind of research field of interest if possible, because possibly someone who's interested in development economics is going to benefit much more from the advice of a mentor who works in a similar field rather than someone who does monetary, who probably has kind of like a different view also on what's required to apply and be in the program.
Lovely. So, Dina, you mentioned these 4 phases. Would you be able to just briefly explain what happens to in each of these phases?
Yeah, so we have 3 phases. The first phase is the webinars. The second phase is the one-on-one mentoring and financial support to apply. And the third phase is the peer-to-peer support during the graduate school.
So what happens in the first phase?
In the first phase, we have webinars that explain to people what it is involved in applying to graduate school. And they get homework to do some parts to do that. In the second phase, they get assigned a one-to-one mentor that is very similar to what we heard about from the PhD students. And we fund their application fees for the schools and for the GRE. And in the third phase, the students, alumni of GAIN, organize group Zoom calls and activities to support each other during graduate school.
And could you tell a little bit about that peer-to-peer support?
It's very new, and actually I'm having a call next week with Abdu and Don Rezo, who are organizing this, and I'll be excited to hear what they'll share, what they did so far. Actually, I'm not part of that. I'm not an African student in graduate school, so I will be excited to learn from them what they are doing. And we are here to kind of support them in the activities. One of the things that we've been thinking about a lot is kind of which roles we want to have African students take on, and which roles we as non-African allies do. Because on the one hand, for representation, you really don't want the leadership of the program be a bunch of white ladies from Zurich. At the other hand, there's also this phenomenon that all the volunteer work for diversity work gets dumped on the minority students. And so what we're trying to do is that, also I'm the oldest person in the program, so I'm there as a resource person sort of for everything. But in general, like we're trying to have the allies do a lot of the sort of administrative tasks and fundraising and organizing things like that. And then having the African students and alumni leading more of the visible work. That is where also the role model effect is really important that you were saying, and so, for example, the phase 3 is built entirely by Africans. in the webinars in phase 1, we try to have a lot of African experts as well, who are doing like leading the conversations and things like that. And then other people are maybe organizing like the website and things like that. So we're trying to, and this is the conversation we're constantly having in the team, you know, how can we empower Africans to take on leadership roles and be the decisions. And I felt a bit awkward actually coming onto this panel as like the Swiss person representing GAIN, because it's very clearly an organization that's co-led by Africans and people from the north. So, but yeah, that's phase 3 is so far purely African led, and I'm excited to learn about it soon.
So I think Parama has some questions about this particular third phase, correct? You can
well, I want to know more about the third phase for sure. And Dina, maybe we can have, once you've settled into that, maybe we can have some of the people who are actually running it back to talk about this. I guess my question was, so definitely here for our UK students who are, you know, relatively privileged, as if they're coming to a mainstream university and they're getting all the information and all of that. One of the things that they worry a lot about is in the US increasingly. So I did my PhD in the US. I went from college. I didn't have a pre-doc and this, that, the other, but everyone, it seems to be an arms race. People are, I don't know what they actually do in the PhD anymore because they appear to have published and this and that and the other. Is that, I would imagine that's an even bigger issue for people outside of the global north. Is that something that you face, or do you think that's an issue?
So I think having published really doesn't matter. If you have published as an undergrad, it won't be in the top journal. So I think anyone who's worried about that, you don't have to do that. My sense is that you want to have, for the US, a master's is not necessarily required, right? So you could go straight from undergrad. My sense is you would want to have either a pre-doc, or you worked as a researcher with a professor, or a master's before applying for a PhD, but I don't think one necessarily needs both. So in my experience, but they can complement each other. But I think that GRE is really, there's a lot of criticism of the GRE in terms of it being an obstacle. I think it's a real asset for people applying from non-very recognized schools, because it's one thing that can be standardized. And so if you have a very strong GRE score, that goes a long way. Or if you obviously already have a master's from the LSE or from Oxford and with good grades, that those are grades that people recognize. But if you say, you know, I was the best student in my cohort at the University of Accra, people don't know what that means. And so I think having some credential from outside, either, well, a good GRE, you can do it even from your home, or a pre-doc or a master's. And I think these things certainly help. And one of the things that I'm also thinking is like each individual organization, there's multiple, right, that doing these types of things now, mentoring some people, the research in color does more research experience matching, kind of RA, that we partner, you know, that the same student might get like from all the different organizations, different support. And I would also encourage any one of you, if you have students from Africa who you think could be a good match for our program, that you encourage them to apply for the next cycle in March, and vice versa. This should certainly be like all of us working towards the same goal, rather than the competition. And so, yes, we can't offer people internship opportunities yet, research opportunities. We had one panel now about how to apply to pre-docs instead, but yeah, there's lots of paths towards the PhD, I think.
I can see a hand raised by Gigi. We'll get back to you, but in the meantime, let me go back to Carl and Gaia. So we got a question from Acedia. How can programs join the AMP? How can other universities join this program?
Reach out to us. So we've been doing some work talking to other departments at our own universities, non-econ departments, and just because applying to PhDs is so topic specific, we've decided to kind of keep the program specifically for econ, but we're definitely open for having other universities join. And we've had a lot of kind of meetings with other departments to explain them kind of what challenges we've faced, and to kind of share a little bit of the knowledge that we've acquired so far.
So, I mean, just to summarize the discussion so far, we talked about, why mentorship is necessary, what, AMP and GAIN are doing. Interesting that they're focusing on different parts. AMP is focusing more on the receiving, end of that. And my understanding of GAIN is more about, the exporting side of things, helping students applying. Now, a question to Carl and Gaia again. Perhaps Carl, let me ask that. One important ally in this whole story is the admission office within the universities, right? What do you think that they should do more of to help you, AMP and GAIN?
I think the more important question is to ask how they can help students earlier in the process. I've spoken to Parama in this capacity quite a lot already, and I know that a lot is being done to look at, because this is why the pipeline is leaky across the different levels of so from school to bachelor's to master's PhD. And I think universities could potentially do more to help earlier in the pipeline where we can't do as much. Like the reason that we focus on this particular stage of the process is because we think that we can add the most value there. But I think to help applicants, I think more can be done earlier in the process. And I think, like I said, I've spoken to Parama about this quite a lot already. To help us as a program, I think, and I have to say, it's quite impressive that as Dina outlined, that you have so much financial backing. And I think that this is something which also would help us. I think it's quite remarkable that you can finance people's application fees. I'd also have a question about that. Like, how many can in theory all students progress through all stages of your program, or is there a selection process? Sorry, that's just. And I think another thing that would be quite helpful for us is the logistical side, because again, I think it's as we realized, it's quite a big logistical burden to organize all of this at this scale, and it would be very, very helpful for universities to provide more support with the logistical side of running the program. Yeah, Gaia, what do you think? Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing that I wanted to add is that in practice, one thing that we also discussed with the admissions office at the LSE and with students as well, is that one thing that could be done that's quite easy is to try and make the information as clear as possible on the website, because that already alone can be a huge help for applicants who don't come from a background where they have a lot of connections. And one silly thing is, for instance, the deadline for application. If it's not clear and signaled on the website, it's possible that a lot of people miss it. And a lot of these people, chances are not going to be those who are more kind of in the game or more connected.
So Dina, just to go back, I mean, you talked about, sorry, yeah.
I wanted to just add to those because there were some questions. So in terms of the selection, Carl, yeah, our limit is exactly that. We can't fund that. We are constrained by how many people's application fees we can fund. So we limit the number of schools somebody can apply to, which is obviously not optimal, because for the people who are not resource constrained, I recommend, apply to 25 schools, but we cannot pay 25 unless they find some that are free. And then we limit the number of students who get into the mentoring phase 2 because it comes with funding and we have limited funding. So that is our constraint. And so to your question, Ramin, what would be my request from the admin offices is, can you please scratch application fees for people from low-income countries, lower middle-income countries. It's completely prohibitive if somebody has to pay $2,000 for application fee. Every school thinks, okay, my $50, my $75, it's not much. And then you add that up over 10, 20 schools, and it's somebody's monthly salary or the whole family's monthly salary and some other person's school fee that doesn't get paid if the person applies, and it's completely prohibitive. So that would be the biggest game changer if there were no application fees for lower middle income and low income countries, and maybe reduced application fees for upper middle income.
just to check, apart from you do support on application fees, you said you also provide support on GRE, correct? Or no?
Yes.
You provide funding on that as well. So one other thing, I think I completely agree with you. The issue of fee and visa requirements is also always a problem, an invisible problem. Sometimes the internet as well, things that we take for granted, right? It's sometimes if I have a personal experience of mentoring students from Iran, in their applications, and sometimes they have a basic problem of they can't access the internet to apply. So very good. So this is, we talked about, support from the local level, the university level. Let's start with the bigger level, these networks. Gaia, Carl, Gaia, what do you think that these bigger networks, let's say in the case of the UK, Royal Economic Society could do to help your program?
Great question. I'm gonna go back a little bit to what Carl already mentioned. And so initially, when we started the program, we were a bit worried that we would not be able to recruit enough mentors. In reality, participation has been amazing. And so this is not a margin of the problem. Really, a big problem is how to manage the program. So everything that goes behind it. And so if there were some funding or resources available, we really think that what could make a difference is, having providing assistance really with all the kind of more administrative side. Carla, I don't know if you want to add.
One thing that just spontaneously came to mind, Gaia, when you said that you guys are very incorporated within one economics department. I could imagine a department saying, okay, we're going to make this a course or a seminar or something. And then some professor getting teaching credit as if they were, teaching a seminar, that they are coordinating all this stuff. And you're learning some skills clearly by doing this. And you can read some research on these topics.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Who gets teaching credit for it, then they can help and they have more experience in managing things. That would be a way for the department could do it without having to raise more money. Just a thought, because we are totally decentralized, we are all over the place, and so that wouldn't work for us. But since it's something that is one school, I think that could work well. Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. And actually, speaking to this, so this also might be helpful for kind of other programs, or if someone wants to take kind of inspiration from the ANP, is that we kind of had to draw a line at some point as for how big the program was becoming, because we got in touch with a similar program who's based at MIT. We do very similar stuff where we have calls maybe twice a year just to kind of touch base and discuss about common issues. But merging the two programs would have become a bit too big and a bit hard to manage. Really, the scale would have been a bit too much.
So Dina, on your end, what do you think these, international networks can help? AEA, RES?
I think one thing would be this pushing for eliminating or reducing application fees. If this comes like a joint thing that we, want to change this as a profession. Where the International Economics Association has been very helpful to us. They provided a little bit of funding. They also help to disseminate our call for mentors. So far, we have also been lucky to have enough mentors, but if we grow more, I think, that will become a big, circulating the call. I think those are, obviously can support and coordinate all the different grassroots movements, groups that have started. But if I had to pick one thing, I would say pushing for the abolition of the application fees, because I think that's where they have an advantage over us to be decentralized. One-on-one mentoring, in the end, it's a one-on-one thing, and there's not that much economies of scale in it, but lobbying for these fees, I think there are.
Gigi, would you like to go ahead and open up your mic and ask your question? I don't think we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
So I have a question. You guys have been, and commendable, you guys have been paying lots of attention to people in Africa. But down here in the US, there are Black communities that can't actually afford this. And when they apply, because of their IP address shows they're coming from the US, how does that, what model do you guys have to use to factor into this? And one thing I've noticed since teaching IT, my PhD is in developmental economics, but every time I've taught in like several universities, visiting professor tenured, I've noticed that most African American, or well, in particular African American, most African students go to different departments. They're more interested in sports, economics of sports, sport management. Is there any way, because if we want to get more African into the econ field, we have to tailor into their interests. So, and I've heard all these amazing things, labor economics, population economics, but when I interact with these students, when they come to my office, and this is an anecdotal evidence, I believe 95 to 98% of them are interested in sports.
That's really interesting. I hadn't had, so we are working mostly with people who haven't been in the US yet, right? And so in that group, I have heard people more interested in development or macro or health, which is more what they have maybe seen in terms of research being conducted by professors there. I don't know in your situation, if you have somebody who starts being interested in sports economics, maybe that's like a good gateway into the field, and then they also take other classes and they get excited about other topics also. I mean, I think people change also once they're in the PhD or in the master's, like their research interest, and then not necessarily staying in that. But I don't have that much experience with that. I think the first point you raised, I think, is a really important one, is because these application fees are generally a problem for low-income populations, also within rich countries. So I was sort of advocating for sort of quote unquote my population, because we're really focused on people who grew up in Africa. But I think you are totally right. And obviously, Black Americans are hugely underrepresented too. There is an organization called Research in Color that is focused on people of color in economics much more broadly, and where your students could also participate if they're American. And then there's another one that's only for Black women. It's called the Sadie Collective. Those are two organizations that are open to African American. The second one only African American women, but Black women and people of color in general, that I could highly recommend to your students. In terms of application fees, one benefit that American students have is that very often there is a formalized way that you can apply for application waivers when you're American. That is sometimes much more complicated from abroad, because it's more clear what is a low-income student. I think sometimes, I don't know the American system so well, but I've heard that for citizens, it's easier to get waivers. But maybe Sadie Collective and Research in Color would have more information about that.
So let's focus more on the future. So you said to Carl and Gaia, the best supports that that could be provided from these networks is money for waiving fees. Dina mentioned that as well, admin support. Now let's focus on the promotion side. What has been your promotion strategy so far? The channels that you're trying to promote these, let people know that such a thing exists, because in of itself this is an information barrier as well, right? That someone is capable and talented but don't have access to this information to get to know about your program. So what's your strategy on that front?
So I mean, this is obviously a problem, because the demographic that we're reaching out to is they don't shout, "Here, I'm here." That's the whole problem in many cases. So the way that we've been trying to do this is to, in the first instance, avoid the big networks on Twitter, for example, because that often is an echo. So in the first instance, so because that often then becomes an echo chamber. So the thing that we try to do first is to reach out to networks of Twitter, which might know groups and individuals who might benefit from our mentoring. And only once we've done that, to go onto Twitter and to approach some of the bigger organizations we've received great support in that regard from all of the universities, from the RES as well, and also individual professors who have spread our message kind of through their social media channels. But yeah, this is obviously an issue, and I think also something that we're hoping to get more helpful, and also have a network effect between the different initiatives, and to see how other people reach out to potential mentees. Gaia, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, for sure. This is an issue. We've tried to rely on kind of like individuals as well. So we asked professors in our department, even the PhD students, to share the call with whoever they thought might have access to a network of people who might be interested. But again, yeah, and we would be really happy to hear if anyone also has a thoughts on this, or kind of strategies that they think might work, because yeah, this is really a challenge.
I know, for instance, Sam is in the audience. Discover Economics do this, but much at a lower level, I think in high school level. So the issue is, at the moment, you got a talented undergraduate or postgraduate students, and you want to reach to that person and encourage them, say, yes, you can apply. So targeting that person. Dina, any thoughts on promoting?
Yeah, we're trying our channels. For example, here, I'd like to reiterate, if any of you have students who grew up on the African continent and who are interested, please encourage them to apply in the next cycle. We do Twitter, we send it through mailing lists. We also did some word of mouth, so we found like every year more people apply. We have the benefit that we can, we apply a lot to meet a lot of people to the first stage. Then people can also self-select, doing the tasks in the beginning on their own, and then we have to select among the people who already did the first phase and know what they're getting themselves into. So we don't have to be as selective in how we reach out. We just want everyone who's African and interested to know about it, so that they can opt in.
Okay, so lots of things that we covered. What's the problem? We talked about two amazing mentorship programs, and one focusing on the receiving side, the other focused on the sending side. And we talked about what these, universities and these networks like AEA and RES can help support these programs. One was money for, waiving application fees. The other one was admin support. Especially at the departmental level, that Dina mentioned. Now, let's just focus on the future as closing remarks. I'm going to go through each of you and ask you to, just tell us what are your plans for the next step. Carl?
I think our plan for the next step is probably to make AMP a bit professional, but more professional, but to make it logistically a bit more organized, and to kind of give it that bit more of an edge, and also to reach out to more students and potential applicants. I think that would be sort of my broader wish for the program as well. Gaia, what do you think?
So improving the targeting, basically, the reachability of this program, that would be your main focus for the future, correct?
For sure. I think that's the biggest issue, because it's the challenging principle of what we're trying to do. And yeah, I don't know an obvious answer, sadly.
Gaia?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if AMP and its format can inspire and help other departments or other universities set up similar programs, I think that would really be amazing as well, because really students are happy to volunteer and help, but there needs to be a little bit of kind of a structure or facility that helps them do that. And down the line, you can have a really big impact.
I think that I can think of that these global networks that RES and AEA are doing is just putting all these initiatives together under one umbrella, that you can have these positive spillovers, at least on that end. But as you said, the main challenge remains, how can you improve the reachability, the targeting of these programs? So Dina, final thoughts, on the future.
Yes, let me start with the big future. I think the present is very embarrassing for our profession. Both in the, I was talking a lot about African representation, but as Gigi pointed out, African American representation within the US economics, where I was for 12 years in the US, is equally abysmal. And I'm really excited to see how many, especially very young members of the profession, are really working towards changing that. And my vision is like, like now we would think a panel on abortion without women, it's really embarrassing. But a panel on Africa without Africans is completely common. A panel about, poverty in urban neighborhoods in the US without African Americans or without anyone who grew up working class is also very acceptable. But I'm glad to see many people share the view that is unacceptable. So my vision is that, research on communities is driven by people from those communities. And so I think we're taking all little steps, but many places are taking steps. And I'm excited to think that, our children are going to study economics. They can study economics with professors from all classes and all ethnic and geographic backgrounds. And so I mainly want to thank all of you. You're clearly on this call because you care about this topic. And I think, with so many, we started this thinking we're the only ones, and then I saw Sadie Collective and Research in Color, and now you guys and MIT, and it's growing and it's exciting to see. And I hope we can all support each other. And having less people who look like me in the profession and more people who look different in 10, 20 years from now.
So let's everyone join and help these two programs to make our profession less embarrassing.
Yes, I like it.
So thank you all for the great seminar. And here at CTEL, we're happy to help. Right. So round of applause for Carl, Gaia, and Dina. Thank you so much.
Well, so much.
Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.